I really like those sounds. It's from a track on Apple Music called Ambient Nature Sounds, Jungle Sounds. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Thursday. Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us? James in Annapolis, Stephen in New Hampshire, Yehud in South Carolina, Renee in Indiana, Sharon in New Jersey, Debbie in New Jersey, Joseph in New York City, Joe in Texas, Guy in Ohio, Lucy in Minnesota, Barbara in Central Arkansas, Martha in California, Paul in the Great Northwest, Nancy in North Carolina, Dorothy in Pittsburgh. Debbie says, please stay safe. Dawn in L.A. Paula loves the sounds too. Karen in Northern California. Laura in Oklahoma. And over there on the YouTube side, Aoife, shalom from Florida, post-hurricane. My family's all safe here in Ocala, thank God. I'm so glad to hear that good news. There was the hurricane in western Florida, and a small part of eastern Florida had a tornado, or there were multiple tornadoes. One was actually quite near my dad's house, but thank God we did not hear any reports of any calamity over there. Okay, very exciting. This is the 999th page of Talmud we are learning together. That means tomorrow, Friday, the regular Friday time, noon Pacific, we hit 1,000. 1,000 pages we'll have studied together. Pretty cool. Do you know how many pages there are in the Talmud? 2,711. So that's a big dent, right? This is a seven and a half year process. Tomorrow we'll hit 1,000 out of 2,711, significantly past 1/3. So I guess when we get to, God willing, having covered 1,350 and 6 will be the halfway point. But I want to keep mentioning this. We are going to have to take a hiatus. So the group is going to have to learn on its own. Nina and I were discussing it this morning. Probably the hiatus will begin. I want to teach at least once in the Sukkah. So after Sukkot begins and after the first 2 days of Sukkot, which are the holiday, so then maybe the first day that I can teach, we'll probably do like a highlights of 3 days since we'll have had a 2-day holiday from the Sukkah. And then at that point, pre-production, we're really only in pre-production on our movie, thriller. Accidental title is Guns and Moses, a thriller murder mystery with the rabbi as detective. This group is going to love it. Title is probably going to change. That title, Guns and Moses, I call it an accidental title because it was just sort of a working title, the concept. It like sort of sums up the concept. In the sense that a rabbi is thrust into a detective role and against some real bad guys. But the title will probably change. But you got the idea, you got the picture. I was hoping to just only stop teaching when formal pre-production begins. But at any rate, that's only a few weeks away anyway. And already the workload is insane. I just have a backlog of non-movie work that I'm struggling to get to every day. And I'm only sleeping 4 or 5 hours. So something's got to give, and sadly, it's going to be this class. So just during pre-production of the movie and production, right? So it's just not possible to do otherwise. But we'll be keeping you updated about what's going on with the movie, since it really, it's a subject matter that is going to be great for Accidental Talmudist and our audience. He's not just a rabbi, he's a Hasidic rabbi. And he brings, it's not a faith-based movie. It's really about a guy who's a very unexpected detective thrust into that role. But he comes with his values. He comes with his sweetness. He comes with his belief in the goodness of others and a skepticism that he has to build. Sadly, tragically, anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks are part of the real world now and getting worse every day. And so a Jewish community that learns to defend itself, that is ripped from the headlines, and it's something that we need to do. And as I mentioned here before, I myself and a bunch of my friends are part of Maginam, a security force here. We've received extensive firearms training, and we're licensed by the state of California. so that we carry a firearm in synagogue. And this is especially important for the small synagogues that can't afford armed guards in front. I wish we didn't need to have that kind of preparation. I wish nobody needed it. But that's what's going on in the world today. All right, so just a little bit update of what's going on in our lives. Okay, so today's daf, which is page 85 here in Tractate Kesubos, the 15th volume of the Talmud, the laws of marriage contracts. We are in chapter 9 and continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 2. Today's daf is sponsored by Lisa Lewis for the healing of Fern, the daughter of Wauzel and Henry, for the healing of Marianna bas Juliana. May we only hear good news. May she have a complete and speedy recovery. And I should have said Aliza, right? So Aliza is sponsoring our show. I guess that's her Hebrew name and a beautiful name. And so may you, Aliza, and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. Thank you for donating to Accidental Talmudist and enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. Also dedicating today's learning to my mom, Babet bat Yoel. May her neshama, may her soul have a great elevation in the world of souls. All right. We began this Mishnah yesterday. So this chapter 9 sort of parallels what we were learning in chapter 8. In chapter 8, it was whether a woman could be asked to give up her rights within a marriage. If she was willing to give up her rights, there's certain rights that she just can't give up because the sages provided those rights to her and then provided mechanisms to protect a wife's rights within a marriage. What if the husband wants to give up some of his rights? He has a right to the produce of her property. For example, if she brings a field in from her father's family into the marriage that she expects to keep when she goes out of the marriage. Okay, so during the marriage, the husband is entitled to the produce of the field in return for him sustaining his wife with food, shelter, clothing, everything. So he can use the produce of the field, for their family home. He's entitled to do that. What if he says, I give up that right? What if he says, I give up the rights to the produce of the produce? Or I give up the right to inherit anything from my wife that I would otherwise have a right to inherit? Can he do that? These are the kinds of questions we are examining. Today on page 85, we're going to get into a fascinating series of incidents, right? We're always distinguishing when the sages are talking about hypothetical issues of law, which are often so liminal and would never happen in the real world, but they're struggling to understand exactly what is God's will, even in a case that would not happen in the real world. So we just understand a little bit more about God than we did before, versus actual incidents that happened in the lives and places of the sages where they were called to issue rulings of law in cases that came before a court. And today we're going to have a whole bunch of those. And so they give you definitely a fascinating peek into real life in the Talmudic era. It might seem like a very litigious world because they're arguing so many cases, but it's just that we have a series of cases that are given in today's daf. All right, so the Gemara relates an incident. There was a man, we're picking this up at the bottom of 84b. A man called Yemar bar Chashu was owed money by a certain man who died and left behind a boat. So Yemar bar Chashu said to his agent, go and seize the boat for me. Right? This is like a repo man type of situation. Somebody borrowed money, didn't pay it back. The lender says, when am I going to get paid back? He's obviously welching on the loan, so I'm going to seize his property to make good the loan. Is the lender going to do it himself? Fancy banker? No, he's going to send someone to do it in his place. So he said to his agent, and this word agent is interesting because the law will distinguish between an agent and a steward. A steward, I assume, means your regular employee. Your regular employee is considered an extension of you. Whereas you just say to some guy, hey, I appoint you to go seize that boat for me. You created an agency. Maybe you're going to compensate your agent, but that's not the same as sending your employee, right? So the law will make those distinctions. So at any rate here, this man named Yemar bar Chashu, who was owed money, he was owed money by this guy, and the guy died. Okay, so now he's like, I'm never going to get paid because my borrower died. So he sends his agent, go and seize the boat. So the agent went and seized the boat. Now Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, encountered the agent who had seized the boat. And they said to him, you are seizing assets for a creditor in a situation where your action will cause a disadvantage for others. Why? Because the debtor owed money to other people as well. I'm reminded of, what's that movie? Oh God, I'm being such an idiot. Never mind. But you've seen many situations where a borrower owes money all over town, right? So then you might think that in terms of the creditors, the lenders, when they realize this guy isn't going to pay, or that in fact the guy died, it's like they're racing to seize the assets, knowing that there's not going to be enough assets to cover all of the loans. So if they seize it first, maybe they will get their money back. But when they do so, it's at the expense of the other creditors. That's why America has a bankruptcy system where somebody can't pay their loans, right? They declare bankruptcy, and now the bankruptcy court appoints some kind of a trustee who's going to go in, seize the assets, and make some kind of an equitable distribution among the lenders, where they might not get everything, but they're going to get some kind of a fair portion of what there is to distribute among them. Okay. So these sages who encountered the agent of Yamar said, you can't just seize that boat for Yamar. He's not the only one who's owed money. So your seizing of the boat is ineffective. And Rabbi Yochanan, and they cited Rabbi Yochanan, who said that one who seizes assets for a creditor in a situation that will result in a disadvantage for others, he has not acquired that asset. He cannot act to the detriment of others without their consent, and his acquisition harms the other creditors. Now, those sages who encountered the agent weren't just themselves citing law in a vacuum, very real world for Yamar, but sort of like hypothetical for themselves. Au contraire, those sages themselves were also creditors. So now, far be it from me to impugn a sage, but it has to be noted that whatever ruling they give, if they are also creditors, they certainly can't be acting as judges. So they have to be very careful when they're citing rulings that benefit them. They're saying you can't seize that boat, right, because it harms other creditors, and we are among those creditors. So what happened? So those sages were also owed money by the same man, the borrower who died. So what did those sages do? They seized the boat for themselves. Whoa. Now Rav Papa steered it with an oar, while Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, pulled it with a rope. Now that means that they acquired the boat, right? So you always have this act of kinyan, an act of acquisition, a formal act of acquisition. If, for example, you're going to acquire through purchase or seizing a collateral on a loan, and you want to make a formal acquisition of an animal, you're going to pull it toward you, just make the animal move a few steps. That's a formal acquisition. Or when you're exchanging a field, you might actually exchange a handkerchief that represents that the field has changed hands. So when they pulled the boat together, one with the oar, one with the rope, they made a formal act of acquisition on the now collateral for those loans. How can they do this? They said to the agent, you can't do it. How can they do it themselves? Well, we have this distinction between an agent and a person himself, right? So perhaps Yamar himself could have seized the boat. His agent is not permitted to seize the boat. The sages who are themselves owed money would be in the same position as Yamar. So if Yamar could seize the boat, then they also could seize the boat. And perhaps what they're, just taking advantage of, and not unfairly, is that they know the laws, right? So they're using the law properly. So what happened? So Rav Papa steered it with an oar, while Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, pulled it with a rope. And this sage said, I acquired all of it. And that sage said, I acquired all of it. So now they're arguing with themselves, the two sages that said, well, the agent can't acquire it, but actual lenders can. So we each want to acquire it. One of them was pulling with the rope, one with the oar. They each said, I have made a formal acquisition. They weren't saying we'll share whatever are the proceeds of this boat. Each wants to acquire it for himself, probably because each has lent substantially more than the boat is worth, and they're trying to get something back on the loan. Now, Rav Pinchas bar Ami encountered them, and he said to them, what about the opinion of Rav and Shmuel, who usually argue with each other? But in this case, both say, and this, that whoever takes first possession has acquired them, is the law, provided that the items are arranged in a pile and placed in the public domain. Okay, so you could seize detached produce. You could seize, right, movable goods to make good on an actual outstanding loan if those movable goods are now lying in the public domain. Was this boat lying in the public domain? Perhaps it was lying in a private lake. And they said to him, well, we too seized it from the current of the river, i.e. the middle of the river, not from somebody's private shoreline, perhaps the guy who died, but rather the boat was already somehow out in the middle of the river, and that's where they seized it from. So they came, maybe that's because they seized it from the agent who had seized it, right? The agent had already taken it from the private shoreline. That's when they got it. Well, they came before Rava to ask him, well, who acquired the boat? Did the agent who first seized it acquire it? Or did these two sages who each tried to acquire it at the same time, did one of them or both of them seize it? So what did Rava say? Rava said to them, you two are white geese, in reference to their white beards, who remove people's cloaks, meaning your actions were unlawful from the start. The sages were wrong, right? These particular sages were wrong, and Rava is calling them out on it. And what is Rava's source for this? Rava says, this is what Rav Nachman said, and this, that whoever takes possession has acquired them, is the law, provided that one seized them from the debtor while he was alive. In this case, however, the borrower, has already died, and the boat was seized after his death. Who owns the boat after the man who died, after the debtor died? Who owns the boat that previously belonged to this debtor who died? His heirs. His heirs own the boat, not his creditors. We've seen that over and over again, right? When somebody dies, their estate passes first to their heirs, and then we see about creditors, widows, etc. But the heirs are in the first position. So nobody had a right to seize this boat in this story. Now, the Gemara relates another incident. Avimi, the son of Rabbi Abahu, owed money to people from Bechozai, and he sent the money in possession of Chama, the son of Rabba bar Abahu, who went and paid the money that Avimi, the son of Rabbi Abahu, owed. And he then said to the people of Bechozai, give me back the document that shows that the person who sent me owes you money, right? So let's review. Avimi, let's just simple names. Avimi owed money in that town over there. And so he sent that money to pay back his loan in the possession of Chama, right? So Chama, who's the son of a sage, Hama's going to that town anyway. So Avimi says, here, take some money. I owe some money in that town. Take the money with you now that you're going there. Pay back what I owe. And once you've paid it, get back the promissory note that I wrote in which those people are holding. Right? I'm paying back the loan, so make sure you get back the promissory note, which indicates that I owe money. Now that I've paid it, I want that promissory note back. So Avimi went there and he paid them the money. And then he said, give me Avimi's promissory note. He asked me to pay the loan and get the promissory note back. The people who received Avimi's money that he sent said to Chama, the money that you paid us was for side debts, meaning money from a different debt, which was not written in a document. Right, so Avimi had borrowed a lot of money in this town. Some of it was evidenced by a promissory note, and some of it was just by oral agreement. So now that money came back, they said, well, we're going to hold the promissory note. We'll just use this money to pay for the oral agreement debt, right? So we're not going to give you the promissory note. So Avimi said, whoa, but he told me to pay back the loan that was evidenced by a promissory note. So give me the promissory note. They said, no, he owes us other money. We're not giving you the promissory note. So the case came before Rabbi Abahu. He said to Chama, the son of Rabba bar Abahu, so do you have witnesses that you paid them? Right. So that's the first question. So you gave them money and they didn't give you the promissory note. Do you have witnesses that you gave them the money? And he said, no. So Rabbi Abahu said to Chama, the people that you paid off could have made a more advantageous claim. This is called migo. Because they could say, this never happened. You never gave us anything. And they could also say, these are side debts. Therefore, you cannot demand from them either the money or the document. In other words, the migo means that when they got paid and not in the presence of witnesses, they could have said, hey, he didn't give us anything. Obviously, it would be a lie, but they would get away with it because when there's a transaction of that sort, there needs to be witnesses, there needs to be signed documentation, etc. And Chama, who, is probably young, a little bit naive, didn't, and certainly should have demanded the promissory note first and then given the money in exchange for it, but he didn't do any of that. Since those people could have lied and said they didn't receive anything, and instead they said, no, we received the money, but we're using it to settle the non-written debts, the oral debts, but we're going to keep the promissory note until Avimi pays off his debt in full. So says Rabbi Bahu, yeah, and that's what's going to happen. Now the Gemara asks, with regard to the payment of the agent, what is the law? See, if Avimi was paying Chama to bring the money and pay off his debt, what about that part of this incident? Must the agent reimburse the one who appointed him for his loss? Now, was Chama doing Avimi a favor? Was Chama getting paid to transport the money and pay off a loan? Did Chama act correctly? You might say, look, it was obvious that what Chama was supposed to do is get the promissory note back, and it's only for that debt that he was entrusted to bring money, and he failed at that. He didn't know there was this other debt, and he allowed the money to slip out of his hands, and he never got back the promissory note, which is what his agency was all about. Since he made a mistake, maybe he himself is responsible for the money that in this particular transaction Avimi lost and didn't expect to lose. Is Chama responsible? Now, if he was a paid agent for doing this transaction, we'd think like, well, okay, if he was getting paid to do it and he didn't do what he was asked to do, maybe he has to suffer the loss. If he was doing it as a favor, we might have a different feeling about that. But what does the Gemara say? Rav Ashi said, we see that if one who appointed him said to him, take the document and give them the money, if that's what Avimi had said to Chama, get the promissory note and then you can pay off the loan, and he didn't do that, well, then he would suffer the loss. The agent would suffer the loss. Chama would suffer the loss. But if the principal, if Avimi had said to Chama, listen, pay off that loan and then get the promissory note back, which seems to be what he actually said, well, in that case, Chama did nothing wrong. He followed instructions. He gave the payment of the loan, and then he thought that he was going to receive the promissory note back. And it must be that his principal, Avimi, forgot that there were other debts that those people might seize the money for. So in that case, Chama did nothing wrong, and he shouldn't have to bear any responsibility. So the Gemara comments, this is not so. Rav Ashi's ruling is not accepted as the law. Whether the instructions were given, give them the money and get the promissory note, or get the promissory note and give them the money, doesn't matter in which order Avimi entrusted this mission to Chama, because it's obvious that what he wanted was to exchange the money for the promissory note, so the order of speech is not that important. And the principal can say to his agent, I sent you to act for my benefit and not my detriment. His right to act as an agent did not extend to a case where it was to the detriment of the one who designated him. So Chama should have realized that, and in fact, he blew it, according to this view. And so what is the law? That's where they left it off. We're not sure exactly what ended up happening to Chama. But in terms of the law of I sent you to act for my benefit, if a debtor's agent paid off his debt without witnesses, and the creditor subsequently claims that he accepted the money as payment for a different debt and refuses to give back the document, that's his case, then the agent must reimburse the one who appointed him for the loss that he caused him in accordance with the conclusion of the Gemara. So yes, Chama was responsible. So don't be too quick to accept an agency. Here they didn't specify whether it was a paid agency or not. If a debtor's agent paid off his debt. So it's not clear whether Chama was getting paid to undertake this agency. But that is to show you that if you say you're going to handle money for another person, you are undertaking a serious responsibility. Now there's another incident. There was a certain woman who had a bag full of documents deposited with her. Right? So a man had some documents. Perhaps the documents represented promissory notes. And he just kept them all in one place. And then he thought, you know what? It's not safe in my house. Here's a woman who has a more secure household. So I'm going to deposit this bag of, documents, financial documents in her house, right? Much less likely to be robbed from her house than in my house. So I'm going to let her hold on to them. And then this man died. So the man's heirs, right, his sons, came and claimed the bag of documents from her. She said to the heirs, I seized the bag of documents from the deceased while he was alive because he owed me money. She's saying, whoa. The reason I have his bag of documents is not because he deposited them here for safekeeping. It's because he owed me money, right? Or even he deposited them here for safekeeping, but then later he fell into debt with me. And so I seized the documents that I was holding to pay off the money that he owed me. Now, we saw you can't seize assets from somebody after they die if you're going to come ahead of the heirs. But she's saying, I seized these documents to pay off the loan that he owed me before he died. They were in my care, so I seized them. I considered them seized while they were in my care and during his lifetime. So the case came before Rav Nachman for judgment, and he said to the woman, do you have witnesses that the deceased claimed the bag from you while he was alive and you did not give it to him? Oh, you can't just say you seized it while he was alive. The act of seizure would be he came to get the documents back and you said, I will not give them back to you. Then they're considered seized according to Rav Nachman. So she said, no, I didn't do that, or I don't have witnesses to that effect. So he replied, well, if so, this is considered a case of seizing property after the death, right? Now is when people come claiming the documents, not before he died, but his heirs are coming to you now. Now you're trying to seize the documents. That's seizing after death. It's not going to work. The heirs are entitled to the bag of documents because seizing after death is nothing. Another incident. There was a certain woman who was obligated to take an oath in order to avoid payment in Rava's court. So we've seen already in several kinds of situations. For example, if a man dies and he leaves a widow and creditors and heirs, right? So, and then there's some property deposited with the court to be distributed. The heirs just come in and say, we are the heirs of this man, and they receive the money. If there are no heirs, the creditors and the widow, they come to the court and they have to swear an oath. Heirs don't have to swear an oath. Creditors and a widow do have to swear an oath. And there's other kinds of financial transactions where there's not good written evidence of the original transaction, and we make people swear an oath. Clearly, this is only going to work in a society that has fear of God. Otherwise, people just lie and swear the oath that means that they can get money. But these people had fear of God as a general rule. So it happened, the way this case fell out, this woman was obligated to take an oath in order to avoid payment, right? People came and said, hey, she owes us money. And we're going to say, well, she will not. Now, normally, you have to provide the evidence to disgorge money from the possession of another. But whatever the facts of this particular case were, she's the one who had to take an oath in order to hold on to the money. So that's the way the facts laid, right? So she needs to take an oath in order to keep the money. Okay, so she's about to take the oath. But the daughter of Rav Chisda said to Rava, the judge in that court, who is the daughter of Rav Chisda? Rava's wife, right? So she's the daughter of a sage and the wife of a sage. The daughter of Rav Chisda said to her husband Rava, I know about this woman, that she is suspect with regard to taking a false oath. Oh, heavy accusation. Rava reversed the obligation of the oath so that it fell onto the other party, who now had the option of taking an oath that the woman owes him money and thereby collecting his debt. And this is how to act when the court does not trust the one who is obligated to take an oath, right? So even in a society that is generally God-fearing and where you can trust people when they take an oath, not everyone lives up to that standard. Rava's wife said to him, this woman will lie. So he said, all right, well, I know about this guy that he is honest, so let him be the one to take the oath. We'll switch the burden of the oath. That man took the oath. He received the money. Okay. Now we're continuing the same story, but on a different occasion, Rav Papa and Rav Ada bar Matana were sitting before Rava, and a certain document was brought before Rava to be examined in court. And Rav Papa said to Rava, I know about this document, that it records a debt that has already been paid. This particular promissory note should have been returned to the borrower after he paid off the debt, and now it's being presented again. But I know the facts of this case, said Rav Papa, and it's not right. That promissory note should have been returned. I know for a fact that the debt has already been paid. That's what Rav Papa says. Rava says to Rav Papa, is there another person who can testify along with the master about this document that it has already been paid? And Rav Papa said to Rava, no, I am the only one who knows. So Rava said to him, although there is the master who attests, right? Rav is saying, I know I'm talking about a great and holy man, you, Rav Papa. But the problem is you are a single witness. As a single witness, I can't take your word for it that this promissory note has already been paid. I need two witnesses to contradict the written evidence of the promissory note, and you are only one. Even though you are a great, prominent, esteemed, holy sage, I can't take your word for it because one witness is nothing. Now, what's the problem? These guys know that Rava himself, in a recent case before that, took the word of his wife that a certain woman is not trustworthy to take an oath. How did he know that? He listened to his wife. How many witnesses is she? Technically, in that world, none, because a woman doesn't count as a witness except in very limited cases and not in financial matters. But even if you say that a woman's testimony in that world can be accepted in this matter, she's still a single witness. So you can imagine Rav Papa saying to Rava, whoa, when your wife said to you that you shouldn't trust a particular woman, she was one witness and you listened to her. And now I, a great sage, say, I know this promissory note has already been paid. And you say to me, that's only the word of one witness? What gives? Right? So what happens? So Rav Ada bar Matana, who's sitting there watching this whole thing, said to Rava, whoa, and should Rav Papa not be trusted like your wife, who's also Rav Chisda's daughter, who as a woman is disqualified from testimony, and yet you accept her testimony even as a single witness? And Rava replied, yes, I relied on Rav Chisda's daughter, my wife, because I know with certainty about her that she is always truthful. I'm the judge in this case. I happen to know, because I know my wife very well, that she never lies. I can absolutely rely on what she told me. However, with regard to Rav Papa, I cannot rely on the master because I do not know with the same degree of certainty about him that he is always truthful. And I cannot rule on the basis of one witness until I have complete certainty. Now, Rav is in a terrible spot, and it's getting worse by the second. But what he's saying is right in the sense that, I mean, it seems highly biased. He's putting more trustworthiness on his wife than on his fellow sage. But what can you say? He knows his wife. He lives with her. He's probably lived with her for 20 years, let's say. And Rav Papa, he super respects and has only every reason in the world to believe that Rav Papa would never lie. But he doesn't live with him. He hasn't seen him on a daily basis for 20 years. He can't have the same degree of certainty that he has with his wife. So Rav Papa says to Rava, well, now that the master has said that the claim, I know with certainty about an individual that this is a significant matter, i.e., it is a claim that can be used in court, right? So you have established quite a precedent here, Rava. You said that if a judge has personal knowledge of a witness, personal knowledge that they would never lie, so you are setting aside the requirement that you need two witnesses to establish a matter because of your extreme, perfect, personal knowledge of that person, because you know them so well. You, the judge, are going to say, well, it's somebody that I know that well that they would never lie. I'm going to accept their testimony as if they were two witnesses. It's quite a statement, right? Rav Papa is saying to Rava, you made quite a statement and quite a precedent as a judge. So, for example, says Rav Papa, if Abba Mar, my son, right? So Rav Papa has a son who is a great sage and a judge in Israel. For example, if Abba Mar, my son, with whom I know with certainty that he always tells the truth, if he comes before my court and claims that a document that records a debt has already been paid, then I can tear the document on the basis of his word, right? So what Rav Papa is now saying to Rav is, okay, I told you that this promissory note had already been paid and that therefore it should be torn up. And you said you can't take the word of a single witness. But you did take the word of a single witness in the case of your wife because you say you knew her with a total certainty she would never lie. Okay, so if I, Rav Papa, am sitting in my court and a witness comes before me who is, to my certain knowledge, somebody who would never lie, and he says that promissory note has already been paid off, it needs to be torn up, I will tear it up. And I will say, in the name of Rava, who established this precedent. That's what Rav Papa is saying to Rava. Like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Now, the Gemara asks, how can it enter your mind that the court could tear up a document based on the word of a single witness? That's not what Rav Papa said. What Rav Papa said is, okay, it's by Torah law that we're not going to tear up documents by the word of a single witness. I'm not that crazy. But what the precedent you've established today, Rava, is that when you have a witness who is to the judge's certainty, somebody who would never lie, it's going to have significant weight in that court of law. That's not a bad precedent to establish openly, because obviously human nature, and judges are human, is, all right, we're not going to tear up a document on the testimony of a single witness, but generally speaking, somebody who to the judge's certain knowledge would never lie, his testimony in court won't amount to the testimony of two witnesses, but will carry great weight, right? That is what Rav Papa is saying to Rava. It's not a bad precedent. So, another incident. There was a certain woman who was obligated to take an oath in Rav Beve Barabaya's court. The opposing litigant said to the judges, okay, let her come to take an oath in the town. It is possible that she will be ashamed of her lies and will admit that she is liable. Like, she's lying and she keeps lying, but she's lying when people come visit her at her house. Let her come into the courtroom in the middle of the city where people are all around and can look her in the eye while she's telling that story, and let's see if she sticks to her lies, right? So it's a way to try to get somebody to tell the truth by doing it in public rather than sticking to their story while talking to one person at their house, that kind of thing. Well, she said to the judges, all right, I'll come to town, but write a document of rights for me so that when I do take the oath, they will give me this document and will record what I said in front of everybody, and I will never have to come to town again to repeat my story because it will have been established in a court of law and signed by the judges. So I want my testimony to be written out in advance. So I'll come, I'll tell my story, and then the judges will sign that that's what I said. Why that needs to be written in advance, I'm not sure, but that's what she said. Maybe because she's satisfied that it's going to happen. I want to see it in writing. I will come to the court. I will tell the story just as it is in the writing, and then the judges will sign it. Can they do that? Write a document for me so that when I take the oath, they will give it to me, and I will then be willing to take the oath in the town. Rabbi Barabaye said to them, okay, write the document for her. Now, Rav Papi said, is it because you come from an unfortunate people that you say unfortunate things? Rav Beva was from the house of Eli, whose descendants were sentenced to die at a young age. Tragic. Same story, Hannah, that when she was crying, the story we read on Rosh Hashanah, the high priest, Eli, who was a very holy man, and said to her, when you have a son, the son that you're praying for, he's going to be, dedicated to, you will get pregnant, you will have a son, he's going to be great. And in fact, he became the prophet Samuel. But Eli's own sons were corrupt and were selling sort of indulgences at the Holy Temple. And because of that, a curse was put on their house, and the sons tended to die young in that family, right? So Rav Papi comes from that family. And so this is a kind of offensive thing to say to him. But they're saying, how can you agree to this woman that her testimony will be written out before she testifies it? And then after she testifies it, they'll sign the document. At the time that they write the document, they're writing something that is untrue because she hasn't said it yet. Rav Papi said that Rav Bevai Bar Abaye was wrong to say that what he said because of a statement of Rava. Basically, Rav Papi is going to say, what are you talking about? You can pre-write a testimony that you know is going to be delivered. Nobody signs it. Then once the testimony is delivered, if it agrees with what is in the writing, then they can sign it. If what the testimony is given does not square with what's already written, then they don't have to sign it. There's no problem with that. Didn't Rava say this ratification of judges, which was written on a document before the witness had seen and testified about their signature, is invalid, although the witnesses later attested that it was their signature. Apparently, it has the appearance of falsehood because they affirmed the validity of a document before hearing the testimony. So here too, if the judges wrote a document of rights before the woman took her oath, the document would have the appearance of falsehood, and the court should not write a document of rights for her before she takes the oath. Okay, so I think that would be what Rav Bevai is claiming, why Rav Papi is wrong, right? So Rav Papi's argument that Rava says you can't pre-write a document of testimony. Now the Gemara comments, and this law of Rava's is not accepted, right? So Rav Papi was right. Why? Because of a statement of Rav Nachman. As Rav Nachman said, Rabbi Meir would say, even if the husband found a bill of divorce with names identical to those of his and his wife's in the garbage, and he had it signed by witnesses and gave it to his wife, it is valid. Meaning, it's one of those liminal cases that isn't going to happen in the real world, but just to test the law, do you have to write a specific bill of divorce for you and your wife? Like you actually write it out that, I am going to divorce my wife. I, Tom, am going to divorce my wife, Mary, right? And this is the bill of divorce on this, such and such a date, such and such a place. And then I give it to her, and then we are divorced. Well, what if I'm so cheap, I'd rather not spend the money to hire a scribe to write that for me? But I happen to find that there was a guy named Tom with a wife, Mary, and he wanted to divorce her, but then he changed his mind. But we have the same name, so I'll just take his document and I'll use it and sign it and give it to my wife. Can I do that? The document was not written for Tom to divorce Mary. It was for a different Tom and Mary, but it suits us. Can we use it? Answer, yes, right? Because it's not going to be signed and witnessed until this Tom and this Mary use it for their divorce. And the rabbis do not disagree with Rabbi Meir, except in the case of bills of divorce of women, since the rabbis hold that the writing of the bill of divorce needs to be done for the sake of the woman getting divorced. But for other documents, they concede to him that it makes no difference when the document was written. Right, so the majority says, well, actually, you can't do that for a bill of divorce. But for other kinds of cases, if a pre-existing document works for the case at hand, yeah, you could use it. It won't be signed until you use it for this case. Ooh. Good. I must be speaking in too animated of a fashion if I knock my candle over. I will try to tone it down a little bit. And God willing, we won't have a fire. My goodness. Okay. We're on 85B. We're on 85A near the bottom of 85A. Okay. And so the proof of this is that Rav Asi said, that Rabbi Yochanan said, with regard to a document that one borrowed money based on it, right? So there was a promissory note, and then he repaid the debt. He may not borrow money again based on it, right? I borrow money from Jim, so I take the money, I give Jim a promissory note. Okay, I pay back the loan. Jim gives me back my promissory note.
Later, I need money again. I say, okay, Jim, let's just use the same promissory note. I want to borrow the same amount again. So you give me the money, here's that same promissory note. Now you're holding it until I pay you back again. Can we use that same promissory note over and over each time we make a loan if it's the same amount? Can we do that? Right, Rav Asi said that Rabbi Yochanan said with regard to a document that one borrowed money based on it and then he repaid the debt, he may not borrow money again based on it. And this is because its lien, L-I-E-N, has already been forgiven. Once the debt has been paid, it's getting hot in here. Once the debt has been paid, the lien resulting from the loan is no longer in force. The witnesses did not sign the document at the time of the second loan, right? What made the promissory note valid at the first time we issued it is that witnesses signed it. When I pay off the loan and Jim gives me back my promissory note, and then later I come and want to take a second loan, I say, here's the promissory note. Did witnesses sign to that? No. So that's why we can't use the promissory note again. It's not that the document itself can't be used. We'd have to get new witnesses to sign it. And if we don't do that, no, the second loan doesn't work with that promissory note. Now the Gemara infers the reason that he cannot use the document is because its lien has been forgiven, so that the document is no longer accurate. But as for the fact that the appearance of falsehood, as it was written prior to the second loan, we are not concerned, right? In terms of our original issue, using an existing document, if it works for a new case, can we do that? Yeah, we could use that promissory note again if we brought witnesses again, like crossed out the original witnesses, signed all that, and then signed, as new witnesses to a new loan, then it would work. We're not concerned that this was a pre-existing document. 85b. The Gemara examines cases involving disputes concerning the property of a dead person. There was a certain man who deposited 7 pearls tied up in a sheet in the house of Rabbi Mayasha, the son of the son of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. So Rabbi Mayasha passed away without telling the members of his household on his deathbed and without explaining to whom the gems belong. Right. So this Rabbi Mayasha had received a deposit of gems for safekeeping, and then he died. He didn't tell the members of his household what these gems were. So when he died, they're like, oh, Dad had gems. We didn't know. Cool, Dad was rich. Now we're rich. So Rabbi Mayasha's family and the guy who says, no, those were my gems. I deposited them for safekeeping. They're like, well, no, he didn't tell us that he was holding this for you. As far as we know, they're ours, right? The heirs have the first position. The depositor's like, no, but I deposited them for safekeeping. They said, do you have witnesses? No. Do you have a written instrument that proves that? No. Oh, now we have a problem, right? This depositor might be out of luck. So they came before Rabbi Ami in his court to discuss the ownership of the gems. Rabbi Ami said to them, they belong to the claimant. Why? How could Rabbi Ami say that? The claimant doesn't have evidence. He has neither witnesses nor a written receipt that he had deposited these gems with Rabbi Mayasha. How could Rabbi Ami say, no, we believe the depositor that his claim is real? Why? First of all, because I, Rabbi Ami, I know Rabbi Mayasha, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, that he is not wealthy enough to be able to afford such gems. It must have been safekeeping for someone else. And furthermore, the depositor has provided a distinguishing mark that proves that he is the owner. There was some evidence. The depositor, before he came in the house or looked at the bag, said, I deposited a bag of gems with Rabbi Mayasha, and it was in a bag with, yellow lines around the top and black lines around the bottom. And, he described the bag perfectly by its distinguishing marks. Now, the Gemara comments, and we said that a distinguishing mark is effective only if the claimant, right, the depositor who claims he deposited, if the claimant does not usually enter and exit there. But if the person does usually enter and exit the place of the deposit, one can say that a different person might have deposited the object and he merely saw it there and was able to provide the distinguishing marks, right? So we're going to take the evidence in its totality and make sure that this guy didn't have some other way to get the knowledge of what the distinguishing marks were. The Gemara relates a similar incident. There was a certain man who deposited a silver goblet in the house of the sage Chasa. Chasa passed away without instructing anything about the goblet. They came before Rav Nachman to discuss the ownership of the goblet. And he said to them, just like the last case, I know about Chasa that he is not wealthy, and this goblet would not have belonged to him. And furthermore, the depositor has provided a distinguishing mark. And we said so only if the claimant does not usually enter and exit there. But if the person does usually enter and exit there, then we do not believe in the distinguishing mark because he could have seen it. And another similar story, there was a certain man who deposited silk in the house of Rav Dimi, the brother of Rav Safra. Rav Dimi passed away without instructing his heirs about the silk. They came before Rabbi Abba to discuss the ownership, and he said to them, first of all, I know that Rav Dimi, he's not wealthy. He wouldn't have a bolt of silk like that. And furthermore, he has provided a distinguishing mark. And we said so only if the person does not enter and leave that premises, because if he did, he might know the distinguishing mark, but this person doesn't come and go, so we give him the silk. And the Gemara relates the story of a certain man who said to those who were present at his deathbed, my property should go to Tovia. And he passed away. And then Tovia came in and he said, okay, I heard that he gives all his possessions to Tovia. I'm Tovia. I claim the possessions. And Rabbi Yochanan said, Tovia has come, and there's no need to be concerned that the one who died might have meant a different Tovia. This is the Tovia. Give him the deathbed will, as it were. Now the Gemara adds, if the deceased had said, my property should go to Tovia, and Rav Tovia came forward, so it is assumed that this is not the person that the deceased had in mind. For he said, my property should go to Tovia. He did not say, my property should go to Rav Tovia. But if Rav Tovia is a person who is familiar with the deceased, well, then it can be assumed that the deceased called him by his personal name and not by his title, because he was familiar. They were friends. So if two men named Tovia came forward, what then? I leave all my property to Tovia. Next day, two guys appear saying, my name is Tovia. And it's true. Both of them are named Tovia. What do we do then? Well, if one of them was the deceased's neighbor and the other was a Torah scholar but not his neighbor, the Torah scholar takes precedence because he wouldn't lie. Similarly, if one was a relative and the other a Torah scholar, the Torah scholar takes precedence. I'm almost done. If you have questions or comments, get them in. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If two men have the same name and one was a neighbor and the other was a relative, then what is the law? There's no, Torah scholar who we know would not lie. It's just a relative and a neighbor, both named Tovia. Who gets the money? If the guy on his deathbed just said, all my money goes to Tovia. And the Gemara answers, come and hear the solution from the following verse. Proverbs 27:10. A close neighbor is better than a distant brother. If they were both relatives or both neighbors or both scholars, there is no systematic way of determining who is entitled to the property, and then the decision is left to the discretion of the judges. But basically the message we're getting is, who do we think he meant, right? I mean, let's just take the totality of the circumstances. He said, I give it all to Tovia. It's going to be the Tovia who's closest to him, that he sees the most often, that he cares about the most. That's the one that we want to give the property to. All right, let's go to questions or comments. On Kesubos 85. People want to find a way to keep learning together when you're on hiatus. Great. I love that. That's a great, great idea. You know what? We have a professional Zoom account. So we'll create a link for the AT Daily meeting room. And you guys should just stay on the same schedule that we've already been on. And just at 6 o'clock, Sunday through Thursday, you guys can meet in that Zoom room. And noon Pacific on Fridays. And, after Shabbos at a time that, just do after Shabbos Pacific. Just keep the same schedule. You guys can meet in the Zoom room. And I'll tell you what, if I'm ever available, I'll be happy to come in and learn with you. I know how swamped I'm going to be. I love this idea. And you could have a face group to go with it. Do you want to do a separate Facebook group? You guys can have a separate. Yeah, we'll start a separate Facebook group called AT Daily. That's also a good idea. So Nina, please create a separate Facebook group called AT Daily, administered by AT, just like AT Forum. There's people can exchange comments if they can't make it to the class. We should have that anyway. That'll be great even when I am back in teaching. And then that Zoom room, maybe we'll even keep that going when I come back. I like this idea a lot. Okay, Lucy. Some of us depend on this to help us through the daf. Do you have any suggestions on where else we might find some helpful support teaching that is for beginners like I am? Okay, so first of all, there is an email, a daily email, which covers a few interesting concepts from, where is it? I get it every day. I take a look at it. It's not always good, but it's always got something interesting. What is that called? We'll share a link to this daily email, which is, like I say, really good for beginners. That's the key. Talmud from My Jewish Learning. So if you Google Talmud from My Jewish Learning, so then they have a daily email. It doesn't cover the whole page, but that's good for beginners. Right, the people who are really normally teaching the whole daf, like if you got the app All Daf from the Orthodox Union, from the OU, like I like to listen to that, but I've at this point been doing this for years, and I will say that even so, it's very hard to follow any of those teachers because they all speak yeshivish, right? If you haven't heard, a normal daf yomi shir is taught by and for people who went to yeshiva for many, many years. And they just mix in, Hebrew and Aramaic jargon like it's nothing. And everyone is just assumed to understand. And it's just really, really hard because, like, they prove the key concept and they're not saying it in English and you don't really know what they said. And it's frustrating. If you stay with it, after like months or years, you'll get it. But it's very, very, very difficult for beginners. That's why, in fact, when I first started and went to that kind of a class, the first time I did Daf Yomi, I couldn't follow any of it. And so I just, read in the art scroll on my own for 3 years and then tried going to a class like that again. It was still super difficult, but I had a chance. If your level is high enough, definitely, there's amazing teachers on the All Daf app from the OU. But for beginners, it's tough, right? That's why, I feel like we have a special niche here where I all do it in English and hopefully with some enthusiasm and accuracy to make it good. And I wish I could just stay with you every day, but I just can't be everywhere at once. And we got to pre-produce and produce this movie. So my hiatus is going to be like, 2.5, hopefully not 3 months. Maybe 3 months, right? Less than 3 months, right? I think we're going to start sometime in October, probably the second night of the third night of Sukkot will be the last class. So I can teach once from the Sukkah, and then probably coming back late December. But at any rate, you guys learning together will go a very long way because you guys are all used to the rhythm of this class. And what I would suggest is when you get the Zoom together, maybe just take turns being the one who teaches that day, and read it. Do it from the Koran, right? That's what this class is used to. The art scroll itself is pretty yeshivish, but the Koran Talmud, which that's the same translation you find online at Sefaria, translation and elucidation. So maybe take turns in the class, somebody leading the class each day. But in that environment, this is kind of one way because there's a lot of you and we're also on Facebook and YouTube. But in a Zoom, really the way a shir should go is you got to get through the page. It takes the time, but be open a little bit to interruptions and questions. The class will assume its own rhythm over time, but it might be smart to let a different person lead each time. Sharon, same question. Yosef, the way I remember the meaning of migo is I should be believed since it makes sense to, so let me go. Silly but kind of effective. Right, migo is I could have easily told a lie and got away with it. So I told something that, is to my benefit, but not as much to my benefit as it could be, so you should believe me. That's the concept of migo. Thomas Miller, Hannah did not tell Ellie when she was praying that she prayed for a son. Thank you for the correction. That she was praying. She just said that she was praying. But at any rate, Ellie was a very righteous man. He accused her of being drunk in the temple. She said, no, I am a woman pouring out her heart to God. And from that encounter came all the blessing of her mothering Shmuel.
Sharon, I believe she did. And she told Eli that if she did have a son, he would serve God under Eli's tutelage all his life once weaned. That definitely happened. What the exact exchange between them, I would have to look it up. I do not have the Bible memorized. And I'm not saying that like sarcastic. Obviously, I don't have the Bible memorized. I wish I had the Bible memorized. Our sages had the entire Tanakh memorized. Every single line of the entire Hebrew Bible memorized. And the whole Mishna and the whole Gemara. Those were the kind, that's why we call them sages. Right? They had the whole thing in their minds. And that's why they had that ability to sort of hyperlink from one text to another, make quick jumps, and everybody in the room knew what they were talking about. I wish I had one iota of that ability. But by learning every day, we won't get there. We'll get further than when we started. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Friday at noon Pacific, to cover together our 1,000th page of the Talmud. Be there or